New polling tracks how voters view the candidates in the state's biggest races, but there's a lot more. From busing migrants from Texas to the north and northeast, the battle over access to abortion, the state response to gun violence and mass shootings, we dig into how some hot-button issues could affect the November elections. Hundreds of patients sued in recent years by a Central Texas hospital for medical debt. Our investigation looks at how you can avoid this financial challenge and what to do if you're taken to court.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. Governor Greg Abbott's move to bus migrants from the border to cities east and northeast hit a new level this past week. The state-funded program sent busloads of migrants to be dropped off outside the Washington, D.C. home of Vice President Kamala Harris. The move comes after Harris claimed that the border is secure during an interview last Sunday on NBC's Meet the Press. In the past month, Abbott has ramped up efforts to bus migrants to cities led by Democrats. This, as the number of migrants crossing the border has hit record numbers. Critics have called Abbott's move a political stunt. But what do Texas voters think? Joining us for Insight is Jim Henson, the director of the Texas Politics Project. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here, Josh.
So your new statewide poll asked voters what they thought of the busing. What's the verdict?
Well, the verdict is Republicans are wildly in favor of it. Independents mostly like it. Most Democrats really don't like it. So overall, 52% supported it, 35% opposed. 80% of Republicans supported it, and about half of independents in an election environment that's pretty good for Greg Abbott.
You also asked the voters about the most important issues facing the state. What topped that list?
Well, as always, immigration and border security. I mean, this is the eternal return. How many times have you asked me that? How many times have I told you that? Many, because it's just so solid. So, even if you narrow it down to what are you thinking about going into the election, about a quarter of Texans, but 40% of Republicans say immigration and border security. The economy is second among both Texans overall and Republicans. A good configuration, again, for the governor as he faces a more competitive governor's race.
Now, gun control laws have also become a bigger issue since the Uvalde mass shooting. How did that question play out in the poll?
Well, we asked, several, but I mean, I think the most interesting one that we asked was, do you think Texas elected officials have done enough, too much, or too little to prevent mass shootings? 57% said too little, but again, that changes across the parties. Only 32% of Republicans said too little, 86% of Democrats said too little.
And Beto O'Rourke has made gun control a key part of his campaign. How did he fare against Governor Abbott in the poll?
Well, overall, Governor Abbott leading 45% to 40%. If you look at how Texans expressed trust in one or the other on gun violence, they were split evenly.
And O'Rourke has made a point of traveling around the state trying to sway independent voters and even win over some Republicans. Any sign in the poll that that strategy is working?
Honestly, not so much. Among independents right now in that direct matchup, Governor Abbott has 42%, Beto O'Rourke 22%. You dig into that a little bit more and look at the favorability ratings of each candidate. Among independents, Greg Abbott is 37 favorable, 43 unfavorable. Doesn't seem that great until you look at Beto O'Rourke's independent ratings. He's 23 favorable, 63 unfavorable. We expect generally these true independents, they're about 10% of the electorate, to lean in a Republican direction. We're seeing that in independents' assessments of the candidates right now.
What about the other big statewide races? What did voters have to say about, like, the lieutenant governor race or the attorney general race?
Well, they have less to say, not surprisingly. They're paying attention less, but we're also seeing Republicans with leads at about the same gap. Dan Patrick leading his challenger Mike Collier in a rematch by about 7 points, 39% to 32%. Attorney General Ken Paxton ahead 38-33 over Rochelle Garza. You'll notice that those overall numbers are much lower than the 45-40. Texans just don't pay as much attention to these races or these offices, as important as they are.
A lot of data in this poll. Anything that really surprised you?
Well, I think I was struck by one issue in particular that hasn't come up a lot in the election, but is kind of lurking out there. We asked a question about gay marriage and asked whether same-sex marriage should be legal in Texas. For a lot of people, this feels like a settled issue, given what we've seen in the Supreme Court. 53% said legal, 32% said not legal, and within that, half of Republicans, exactly 50%, still say that gay marriage should be illegal. And I think that kind of tells us something about what's going on beneath the surface, not so much in the discussion of same-sex marriage, but in some of these other issues that have been bubbling up, like public education, the content of school libraries. I think there's still a kind of resentment that's out there in the wake of the cultural changes that have felt to many of us like they were set, but may not be as set as we thought.
All right. Thank you for the breakdown, Jim Henson, Texas Politics Project. Appreciate you being with us.
Great to be back, Josh.
I was so tired of fighting hospitals, fighting treatments, fighting for my life. I didn't want to fight with anybody anymore. I just wanted it over.
Hundreds of patients sued in recent years by a Central Texas hospital for medical debt. How you can avoid this financial challenge and what to do if you're taken to court.